Hello everyone, it's Theme Park Avenue, I'm Eric. When most people think of Six Flags parks, they don't think of the atmosphere or appearance as a strong suit. They think of fading paint, minimal theming, sometimes no theming at all. However, there is one park that is certainly an exception to this. That is Six Flags Fiesta Texas. And today, I'm going to analyze why the theming of this park deserves more credit and might rival some of the best theme parks in the country. Before we get into this video, subscribe to the channel so you know when new theme park content comes out. We do rankings, reviews, and tons of theme park content both serious and funny. Now, to explain what will be happening in this video, I'm going to analyze each individual themed land that is in the park. I'll talk about some of the best details and also some of the potential improvements that can be made to the overall atmosphere of this park. Now, I should note there's going to be quite a bit of nitpicking because I'll be comparing to this park to the likes of Disney and Universal. But I will be mentioning the best details along with the things that could be improved. And I should also note that had I not seen Poseidon Entertainment's video on Fantasialand, I would not have thought of this video. So, I'm just giving credit for this idea, thank you for that. I encourage you all to check out that video for sure. It is an excellent one. Now let's begin talking about why Six Flags Fiesta Texas has some of the best theming of any theme park in the country. Starting with the entrance plaza, we have Los Festivales. This is themed to Hispanic culture, which is prevalent in San Antonio. It seems to be great representation. I'm not the most knowledgeable on this topic, but walking around, the buildings look beautiful. And this is an excellent entrance plaza. You have vivid blues and oranges that contrast each other incredibly well. And then you also have light tan that helps keep a more muted color and doesn't make the entire thing look like some sort of neon nightmare. I think it was quite smart to use those particular colors. There are great small details here. The statue of a dancer in front of the theater is very nice. And one important thing here is that the two roller coasters, Goliath and Boomerang, look great in the land. Goliath is right at the front of the park, right next to the entrance, very imposing figure, and it basically has the new Montu colors, the blue and yellow. Now, the big thing with Boomerang is that it did not used to have the same color scheme, but it now has the blue and orange color that matches the rest of the buildings. So these rides look the part. However, I do feel the theme could be a little better. A name change is really all I'm asking for here. You have Goliath as a Batman the Ride clone, and I'm very happy they did not go with Batman the Ride theming, but the alternative of no theme was barely an improvement for the cohesion of this land. I feel just calling the name of the ride maybe Chupacabra or similar would have helped quite a bit. Boomerang could have a similar thing, maybe they call it Quetzalcoatl or something similar that relates to mythology in Hispanic culture. That said, this area is bright, colorful, and definitely feels like a great part of this land that certainly fits with the overall theme of Six Flags Fiesta Texas. Going clockwise, we head into Spassburg. To get to this land, you go under a train bridge, so it's a very smart way to transition from one land to the other. And Spassburg is drastically different. This one has a medieval theme, primarily German, in honor of the nearly 3 million people who have German ancestry in Texas. So there is quite a bit of German heritage in the state. And they did an excellent job here. The buildings look beautiful, especially with a castle that has some unique architecture to it, but it's also just so wonderful to look at. And one important thing here is the Bugs Bunny Whitewater Rapids. This log flume is pretty much basing the entire land. It's built around it. You have this one large bridge that kind of functions as an arch that the ride travels on and you walk underneath. And it goes right next to the castle. And inside the castle you have a medieval themed queue, and that's quite excellent for the theme overall. And even outside of this one castle building, you have so much. All of the event centers and show buildings look the part for sure. And there's nothing that looks out of place in this very nice medieval themed land. The only thing is that the skyscraper is technically considered part of this land, I feel like it's more just kind of its own thing along the quarry wall, but the walk from the castle to Skyscreamer is a short and sweet one, especially for appearance. The walking pads are also something that is worth mentioning because instead of just using blacktop or standard concrete like they could have for the ground, they did use individual stones that make it feel medieval. So Spasberg is a very cohesive land, and it's one of the best looking and most impressive in the park. The next area is Rockville, and they somewhat toned down the Spasberg area as you get closer to Rockville. That does help a lot, as it makes the transition more seamless. Even parks such as Islands of Adventure don't nail this, because it's admittedly a little weird to go from Jurassic Park to Harry Potter World just like that. Obviously, it's more difficult to do that kind of land, but I still do commend what they did at Fiesta Texas. And Rockville is themed to a 1950s American town, and the rides here do not fit with the land. However, the way they did them, it seems like they were part of it the whole time. So the first thing I need to point out is the overall way they did the land, and that is the fact that it does feel like a 50s town. The center of this whole land is a building, the Auditorium Rockville High School. It's themed to a high school, which is a very clever way to do it given that you would expect to see a school in a town like this. Every building looks nice, they have a full road, and that's one part where blacktop is very smart to use. And something that stands out to me is the traffic light. They have a functioning traffic light that you can walk underneath, and I feel like that's like a really fun detail, reminiscent of Disney Sea's gas leak they have in one of their manholes. So I enjoy this quite a bit. Now the rides are a bit different. So Scream is their drop tower. That was not themed, it does not fit. It's a fine ride, and maybe could have been done a little better, maybe just a different name. Not sure what it would have been, but it's definitely kind of out of place in the overall theming aspect. Poltergeist is fantastic. It's themed to a haunted house, hence the Poltergeist name. And one very important thing is that transitioning from Spasberg to this being the first attraction you see actually looks somewhat similar, but still brings you into the new Rockville area very well. And Poltergeist deserves a lot of credit for its queue. Recently redone, it now looks beautiful. You have statues and portraits, and everything really does feel like a somewhat scary, haunted mansion. And this kind of works as a 50s mansion the way they did it. Not to mention, the OG Haunted Mansion ride in Disneyland was less than 2 decades later. And the architecture does feel just a little older than that one. So I feel they did a great job with the Poltergeist ride, and the fact that this ride is a station launch and is heavily themed in the queue, it could not have been done more perfectly. The other major ride here is Batman the Ride. This is a 40 free spin, and this roller coaster does not fit very well in Rockville on its own, and it's technically been absorbed into a different land I'll talk about later, but the way they put it in the land was brilliant. They have a movie theater building, and on the sign for the movie theater they have the words Batman the Ride in the text as if it's a movie that's going to be playing. So you enter the movie theater building to get to Batman the Ride. Whether you interpret it as you're entering the Batcave through a movie theater, or this movie theater just really themed itself to Batman, I feel like tying it into a movie theater was an incredibly smart way to put Batman the Ride in a completely un-Batman related area. So I definitely have to commend that, because honestly that was a really genius choice. It wouldn't have worked as well if they'd done pretty much any other building you would see in a 50s town. If you had to enter a restaurant to get to the Batcave or Batman the Ride, that'd be a little weird. The movie theater was a very good choice. Now there isn't a whole lot else that really needs to be mentioned for this land, but one very important thing about it is the fact that it's somewhat connected to the next land, and this next land is possibly the most impressive and smart of them all. Fiesta Bay Boardwalk is the land I'm referring to, and this one is a boardwalk theme, as you may guess from the name, and it's still a better boardwalk area than the Disney California Adventure one. So here's the important thing. It is right next to Rockville, at least next to the high school, and they have a full sign for it, and it's kind of like stepping into a different area sectioned off from other parts of the park. And this sometimes is not good for a park, like you wonder, why am I walking all the way back here to get to the DC area of Six Flags America? Well, at this particular park, I think a boardwalk right next to a town works well, because plenty of towns would be built nearby a boardwalk if you stretch the idea that maybe it's supposed to be coastal. And I feel it does not seem like you're suddenly walking into a completely different DC area, so it's relatively cohesive to be right next to the 50s town with the boardwalk right across the street. Maybe this was unintentional, but I feel it was a very smart way to do it, and it feels shockingly immersive to step into this land. The fact that the entire ground is wooden planks. They went all out making it feel like a boardwalk, whereas a lot of other parks would settle with just making the sign say boardwalk and the rest of it just being concrete. One thing that stands out here is the ride lineup. It is all of the cheap carnival attractions you'd expect to see at a Six Flags park cloned all over, but honestly, they feel like the kind of thing you would see at a boardwalk. A Ferris wheel that was perfectly incorporated into the land, and it makes sense they would put it here. A Larson Super Loop, that seems like a boardwalk pier-side thrilling attraction, so that works well. And Pandemonium, the spinning coaster, seems like the kind of roller coaster you could see at a boardwalk. They typically have either large wooden coasters or smaller steel family coasters, often spinning ones. I know the Pleasure Pier in New Jersey is a small spinning family coaster. So these rides all fit very well in a boardwalk area. And then you have Pirates of the Deep Sea, a dark ride that on its own doesn't feel like a boardwalk attraction, but the pirate theme does help. And I feel this ride has an unbelievable queue. Pretty much every turn you're in a different room, themed to a different aspect of, oftentimes, common pirate stories. You have treasure and maps and old-fashioned buildings and ships and waterfalls, and it's quite impressive. And the ride itself definitely continues that good theme, with grand sets and honestly pretty awesome soundtrack, and even some practical effects including steam, and I feel that this fits very well in the land overall. So Fiesta Bay Boardwalk has excellent rides that fit in the kind of boardwalk area they set up, and you're right next to the quarry wall, which seems a little weird, I'm sure. And if they had a lake right next to this, maybe even the Pandemonium going over the lake, that would be possibly the best themed area anywhere. And I think for now, it's quite good. And even though it's technically a dead end in the park, the area is not huge, so it doesn't feel like you are walking super endlessly long time. You can just go right back up to the entrance sign and exit the boardwalk, just like you could with a real one. So this land is very well done. Now we have a not very themed land, and one that somewhat drags down the overall cohesion of the other lands. DC Universe. This is pretty much the obligatory superhero land that you would see in pretty much any Six Flags park. They all have it. Magic Mountain has it, Great Adventure has it in like 4 different places, Great America has it, Discovery Kingdom has it, they all have it. This one, I will give credit, all of the DC rides are somewhat near each other. That is something I cannot say for a lot of the other parks. Now the biggest issue I have is what they did with Batman the Ride. They somewhat absorbed Batman into it. I feel like for Superman Krypton Coaster, Joker Carnival of Chaos, and Wonder Woman Golden Lasso Coaster, this DC area kind of works. But for Batman, it's technically in the same area as them, but it kind of intrudes on Rockville, and somewhat undermines the very smart inclusion of the movie theater entrance for that ride. I still think it's okay, but I choose to believe Batman the Ride is not part of the DC universe, or at least the entrance is not. Now regarding the rides here, they are unthemed for the most part, but they look beautiful. Wonder Woman Golden Lasso Coaster has a solid queue, and a very nice entrance sign, and the ride is built over water right next to the quarry wall. This is kind of awesome, and I enjoy the way they did that. And then you have Superman Krypton Coaster next door, sort of, and this one is the least themed of pretty much every major roller coaster in the park, but I still do like one thing about the theming aspect and that is the Superman on top of the loop. It may not technically mean much for the ride experience, but it looks so much fun and it's a great thing to take photos of. So I think it's actually a pretty major part of what makes this area somewhat work as a DC theme. The other ride is Joker Carnival of Chaos, a Zamperla giant discovery, mainly noteworthy for its queue and facade. You enter through a Joker mouth, that's cool, and inside, there is a full themed queue experience, with this sort of Joker head animatronic that spits steam at you, and there's these incredibly themed rooms, somewhat disorienting, themed sort of the Batman villains, and there's a great mix of practical and screen effects, and the queue is probably Universal level. Like if this were a Universal queue, I think it would probably be a top 5 at the entire resort in Orlando. So that deserves a lot of credit. Now, when you have Superman interacting with the quarry wall, clearly the ride looks beautiful. It goes up on the wall twice, and I think they did a great job with that. The rides here all look good. It's not really themed, and as far as theming for a land, it's just another run-of-the-mill DC Universe area. Pretty standard. But at the very least, they did a great job with the queue for Joker, and none of the rides look ugly, so this is a very good transition area to a more important land. And before getting to that land, I'll just mention Thrill Seeker Park quickly. It's a kids area, looks nice, not really anything special, even as a kids area it doesn't really stand out, but it is definitely fine, and it does not ruin the immersion of the land. Now I should point out, in between DC Universe and the next major area is where the Skyscreamer is. This area, while not necessarily themed, is beautiful. The Skyscreamer is right in front of the quarry wall, at possibly its largest, closest to you, and most imposing. They put 3 waterfalls going down the quarry wall, and it is gorgeous to look at. The train ride of this park goes through the quarry wall behind the waterfalls, and if you ride the Skyscreamer, you can see down into the pools the waterfalls pour into. So this area is one of the most photogenic in the entire park. Even if it's not really part of a themed area, it's quite well done, and I very much enjoy what they did with it. So it's a very nice transition into Crack Axle Canyon, now known as Crack Axle Canyon Scream Punk District. And thank goodness they added that Scream Punk to the name and the theme, because otherwise the new additions would be quite weird. The original idea of this area was to be a 1920s Texas boomtown. So this would be just a setup of simple Old West buildings, just one that was suddenly booming in business at the 1900s era. The quarry wall fits with the Western theme more than any other land, so this adds quite a bit to the immersion of the mostly not themed Crack Axle Canyon area. There is certainly some good theming here. The standout thing is Gully Washer. Their River Rapids ride has a unique sort of building that stands on the turntable that you can see in the park, and there are walking bridges that get into the area that go over Gully Washer and some of its most themed bits. So it's a very solidly themed Old West River Rapids ride, and I feel it works in the area quite well. The other major rides are Iron Rattler and Roadrunner Express. Iron Rattler is not super themed, its queue is simple, but it has some rocks, and the building looks like it could be Old West, so it kinda works, and the entrance sign is good. What stands out with the ride overall is how it plays with the quarry wall. This ride looks beautiful. The first drop looks imposing, even though it's not technically the tallest, and the way they did every drop, the way you can watch it go onto the quarry wall and dive off the quarry wall, and it enters a tunnel that's in the quarry wall, they did an excellent job using the original Rattler layout and constructing something new with it that still used the best parts of its interaction with the primary landform that this park is built around. The other thing is Roadrunner Express, which is an Aero mine train. There's some queue theming, some statues of Roadrunner and Coyote, and this is the most Roadrunner and Coyote roller coaster you can get in the Six Flags chain. Not only is it in a somewhat desert-like area, but it actually does sort of feel like you're going through a Roadrunner Coyote skit. You have a lot of traps set up, and some very nice looking props that all fit with the whole idea. And I think it's just a very well done mine train. It's not my favorite in terms of the thrills, but it's one of my favorite in terms of the theming. Now, the other very important thing to point out here is the screampunk additions. They work well because the steampunk era and the whole steam engine idea is often associated with the Old West, so I can totally see where they would go with this. Daredevil Dive Flying Machines is a flat ride that looks beautiful, has an awesome entrance sign, and has a queue that sort of fits with the idea of these are some of the earliest flying machines. So I think that works quite well in the land. And the colors they use definitely don't clash with the great old western style that the rest of the area has. Dr. Diabolical Cliffhanger still fits with that steampunk idea, but goes a little further than Daredevil Dive. The biggest issue is that the queue is themed very much to robots, so it is far more futuristic than the others. It still carries that steampunk and Old West vibe to an extent, but it's not as subtle or well done as Daredevil Dive. So it does clash a little bit. That said, it looks great, the colors still fit, and it's still an excellent looking attraction, and the overall land definitely fits with the Western theme, and with that quarry wall integration, this is definitely, even though it's not the most heavily themed area, one of my favorites in the park. So overall, Six Flags Fiesta Texas is a fantastically themed park. You have the vibrant, colorful entrance plaza, you have Spasburg being a unique medieval area, Fiesta Bay Boardwalk is a very well done boardwalk area, and Rockville has two roller coasters very cleverly integrated into a 1950s town setting. The quarry wall looks beautiful pretty much anywhere in the park, and Crack Axle Canyon fits very well with a western idea next to the quarry wall, and the new steampunk additions do not take away from it much. One big thing to point out here is these lands are cohesive with an overarching theme. The idea of the park is celebrating Texas culture, as evidenced in the name, Fiesta Texas. The big thing is that every land here, whether it be German heritage, Hispanic heritage, the history of Texas, even just being a classic American boardwalk or town, all of the lands here have some sort of uniqueness to them that feels special to Six Flags Fiesta Texas, but still feel like excellent themed lands on their own. So you have a clear idea of what the park is trying to do, it's doing an excellent job with its theming, and there are only minor imperfections. Every ride looks great in its land, and every land looks great. The theming is second to none in the Six Flags chain, and it's among my favorite themed parks, and one of the most beautiful parks in all of America. Thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed this video. Comment down below your thoughts on Six Flags Fiesta Texas and its theming, and let me know if I should do more videos with analysis of parks like this. Subscribe for more theme park content. I'll see you next time.